I'd like to call the meeting of the Holland City Council to order. Clerk, could you please call the roll, please?
Byrd.
Present.
Peters. Here. Garcia. Trethewey.
Here.
Arnshorst. Here. Corbin. Hoekstra.
Here.
Raymond. Here. Mayor Box.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're going to start the meeting the way that we have for decades here in the city of Holland with two items. First, an opening prayer and then the Pledge of Allegiance. We would ask join us if you would like.
Will you pray with me, please? Our Heavenly Father, thank you for being with us here tonight and allowing us to be part of this wonderful city. Be with those that protect us both near and far. Keep your protective hand on all city employees. Be with those that are not able to be with us this evening. Keep them safe in their travels. This is the time of the year for family and travel. Be with all of us and be with all our families, all of our constituents. Lord, be with those that are ill, the downtrodden, those that are lost for whatever reason. Please watch over them with a special hand. As this is the last meeting of the year, we thank you for your guidance this past year and ask for that guidance to continue in the coming year. Lord, we also ask that we be mindful and respectful during discussions and decisions of other people's opinions. Lord, we pray this in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is our consent agenda. We have a large number of items that are often considered to be routine and have previously been reviewed by council, and it is our practice to enact all of those in one motion unless either a member of the audience or a member of city council would like to have that item removed from the consent agenda, and then it will be put into the agenda in its regular sequence. Are there any members of the audience that would like to have an item on the consent agenda moved to the regular agenda? Any council members that would have an item removed from the consent agenda?
We have to read it first.
Do we? I'm sorry, I keep doing that. We always do that first. Let's have Kathy read the items in the consent agenda, then we'll let you decide whether you want to have an item removed.
Consent agenda summary. Absence excused, Councilmember Corbin and Garcia. Approved minutes of December 4th regular meeting and December 11th study session. Oaths of office. Board of Public Works, adjustment of miscellaneous fees and charges. Board of Public Works, adjustment of water and sanitary sewer charges and assessments. Planning Commission, proposed rezoning of 367 Country Club Road from AG Agricultural District to C1 Neighborhood Commercial District, with final adoption January 8th, 2020. City Clerk, claim filed against the city. Finance Department, financial audit for fiscal year 2019. Finance Department, city budget fiscal year 2020, mid-year amendments. Finance Department, schedule of fees and charges for 2020, adopt a resolution. Finance Department, purchasing, declare items as surplus. Finance Department, deeds for Herrick District Library, adopt resolution. Finance Department, UBS Investments, adopt resolution. Purchasing, award loader bid. Finance Department, United Credit Union, adopt resolution. Downtown Group, appointment of new Principal Shopping District board members.
Move we approve?
Actually, let's ask the audience first.
That's right.
Anyone in the audience who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda and have it placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none. Council, anyone who would like an item removed from the consent and put on the regular agenda? Now we'll entertain a motion.
Move we approve?
Do we have support?
Support.
We'll give that one to Mr. Byrd. Moved by Ernst Horst, support by Byrd. Any discussion? Could you please call the roll, please?
Byrd?
Yes.
Peters?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now I believe that we are to the item on the agenda that I believe most of the members of the audience are here for, and that is our public comment period. It is wonderful to see so many people here in City Council chambers. We rarely have this many people here. This is truly democracy in action. It's great to see members of the public interested in what's going on within their city and within their community. I want to make sure that everyone here understands how this process works in terms of public comment. This part of the agenda is dedicated to one-way communication. It's your opportunity to communicate with council. This is not a time when we are going to be engaging in discussion. This is not a time when we're going to be answering questions. This is a time for you to tell us what your concerns are, what you're interested in the community, what you're excited about within the community. And so please be aware that the only response that you're going to be receiving is a warm thank you for your coming tonight and your expressing your opinions to council. We also want to let you know what the ground rules are that we followed for quite some time here in council. Your time limit, you are limited to 5 minutes. And there are 3 lights on the dais in front of me. There's a green light, there's a yellow light, and there's a red light. The green light will be on for the first 4 minutes, so you know that you are doing very well with time if that green light is on. Once the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left. And when the red light comes on, your time has expired. And we're very strict about that. We want to make sure, especially on an evening like this, where there are a lot of people who are likely to want to come up and speak, that everybody has the right to be able to speak for that equal amount of time. Our Assistant City Manager, Matt Van Dyken, is going to be keeping track of time. He'll let me know when time is up, and I will cut you off when that 5 minutes is up. So please be aware of that as well. When you come up to speak, we would ask that you do come up to the podium and speak into the microphone. We have people watching at home on television. We have people watching online. And if you're not speaking into the microphone, they're not going to hear the very important things that you have to say. So we'd ask you to do that. We would also ask that as you come up to the microphone, you tell us your name and your address so that we have that for the record as well. So having said that, is there anyone here who would like to address the council?
Ann Henriksen, 338 Royal Park Drive, Zeeland, Michigan. And I've given out quarters tonight. You might find a quarter. What I'm going to be talking about is 2 sides to this quarter. If you look at your quarter, you will see e pluribus unum, meaning one out of many. If you turn it over, you will see in God we trust. And that's what I will be speaking from this evening. November 15, Marcy Mioli, Sentinel editorial, said that we are a country, are not a religious institution, but a secular democracy. This is her opinion. I believe here in Holland that we are not a religious institution, but we have a unique faith culture that has resulted in one of the most generous and caring ministries. Like the Gateway Holland Rescue Mission and many other ministries that serve well, clearly they do not discriminate LGBT plus persons in need of help. But just the same, the gospel of Jesus Christ is offered as an opportunity to their clients. God has always been here from the founder of Holland, Van Rolte, to now, and continues to shape our hearts to consider and view others as important. 25% of the residents of Holland voted for the 2019 mayoral city election. Out of that 25%, let's say 22% voted for the present mayor. This leaves a lot of people who did not vote, but still represent the faith community in this city. Keep it in mind, because the fact that the Present Mayor supports having an ordinance of protection for LGBT+. He is also now responsible to all of the residents in the city of Holland, including the faith community. Will he keep it in mind? Will the city council as well take to heart both sides of this coin, secular and faith? Jesus said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. This is the relationship between Christianity and the secular government. As Jim Timmerman, editor of the Sentinel in 2009, said to me, the battleground is between civil rights and religious freedom. 2011, the proposed Holland ordinance was based on that the LGBT persons were unwelcomed in Holland. The accusation was that they could not get employment, they could not find housing. The drumbeat then was primarily because of the religious community that judged them. 2019, the argument is the same, that added the subtle thoughts that not having affordable housing is part of it. Why has the city council dragged their feet? Further discrimination? It has been implied employers have discriminated by firing and letting go workers because they were LGBT. In comments over evictions from rentals, it is implied that LGBT experience deep mental anguish. 2019, they are still victims. Has anyone checked with the actual statistics of these subtleties? The Human Holland Relations Committee has LGBT members and faith-based members, but their reports do not contain any factual evidence of discrimination that line up with these accusatory subtleties. 2019, there's a change in Holland, I'm pleased to say. The Holland faith-based groups are reaching out to ministries to understand how to love and care for their LGBT community. Rosario Butterfield, Hole in the Heart Ministries, just to mention a few. And I do want to say that I attended one at Cornerstone, and it was picketed. It got ugly, but I'm thankful that many just remained calm over the whole thing. LGBT family, LGBT individuals are returning to
Mr.
their
Mayor,
families.
that is 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Ann.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just 1 second, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One thing that the mayor forgot to mention is, please, if you have an electronic device, cell phone, whatever the case may be, turn them off or silence them at this point. And second of all, part of my prayer was being respectful of each other. Nothing has happened to this point, and I'm hoping nothing does. If you hear something that you like, keep it to yourself, please. Saying that we don't want to have rahoos and clapping and things like that. We're being respectful of everybody's opinion, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Truthui. Could you please state your name and your address for the record?
Mayor Box and members of council, I'm Jen Adams. I'm a priest at Grace Episcopal Church at 555 Michigan Avenue. I'm also founder of Holland is Ready and one of the founding members and chair of the board at Out on the Lakeshore at 451 Columbia Avenue. We're here tonight to request that you name revision of the city's non-discrimination ordinance as one of your priorities for the coming year. We ask that the ordinance be revised in 2 ways. First, to include employment protections instead of only housing protections. And second, that the language of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression be added. I want to ask everyone who's here in support of this request to stand. I think that's important to see. Thank you. Now, some of you might remember or might have heard that a similar request was made almost 9 years ago. And 9 years ago, a few members of council refused to support this proposal, saying that the primary work of inclusion should be done out there among the people, building relationships and increasing understanding. Well, I'm here to report that we've done that work, and we've done it with heart, and we've done it with hope, not only for our sakes, but for the growth and vitality of this city. Over the course of these 9 years, Holland is Ready evolved. We were given Holland's Social Justice Award. Out on the Lakeshore launched, and our LGBTQ community center is now open and growing. PFLAG has expanded to include gender safe. Holland Pride has grown into an outdoor celebration held in Centennial Park with hundreds, and some years thousands, participating. This work has been supported by, among others, Herman Miller Cares, our LGBT fund, lots of local businesses, churches, nonprofits, the Holland Police, and the Holland Zealand Community Foundation. But as much acceptance and support has grown, we still need this ordinance, which is the work you can do. Many LGBTQ members of this community still live in fear of losing jobs or being denied housing because of who they are. Local counselors and health professionals will speak tonight to the harm done by living with those fears. We also have an opportunity through this kind of change at the city level to send a strong message to LGBTQ youth whose suicide rates are higher than any other group. 9 years ago, when this came to a vote, over 80% of those who spoke were in favor, and it also came with the strong support of Holland's Human Relations Commission. Mayor and Council, you have even more numbers now. There are now also 49 other municipalities in the state of Michigan that have some form of this language in their non-discrimination ordinances. We understand that there will be an internal process before such a revision can be finalized here in Holland, and we're with you on that, because we want the outcome, the ordinance itself, to be solid, to hold. We realize that our current ordinance already includes exemptions in terms of private housing. Finally, I want to say that while we need this revision for protection, for safety, for health, we also need it in order to heal. Not only as LGBTQ people and families, but as a community too. We need this to heal. We all know how much this issue has been used and misused to divide us. Over the course of 9 years, we who are LGBTQ have been assigned the additional unfair burden of representing a divide. And that's a painful and unfair responsibility to put on anyone's backs. We are not an issue. We are your neighbors, your teachers, your clergy, your small business owners, your line workers, your counselors, your mechanics, your nonprofit directors, your artists, your children, your grandchildren, your siblings, your friends. And so it's time to pass this, and frankly, to get on to more complicated things, Holland, Michigan. Holland is ready for LGBTQ people to say, we get to live here, out on the lakeshore, with pride. So now
Mr.
it's
Mayor,
your
that is
turn,
5 minutes.
Council, to help make it so.
Thank you very much. Hi, could you please state your name and your address for the record?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Sarah Van Tongeren. I'm a mental health professional, and my work address is 222 South River Avenue, Suite 207. My home address is 27 West 25th Street. I'm a licensed mental health professional in the city of Holland. I live here. I work here. I moved here right after the City Council received the unanimous recommendation from the Human Relations Commission to amend the city's non-discrimination ordinance, and then the council voted against following through that recommendation. As a result, I've worked with many individuals and families who are still feeling the effects of their own council members and mayor explicitly voting no. This felt like a no, a vote against who they are as people, and a sign that they are not welcome here in Holland. Because of this, therapists became the safe haven in Holland. to process discrimination that was experienced. For example, a study published by the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2018 showed that individuals who identify as LGBTQ+ are at a significantly higher risk for suicide attempts. I do not take that lightly, especially when you account for age, race, parents' highest level of education. One of the possible explanations of this is that they experience a higher level of discrimination. It often leads to social isolation. Discriminating policies, such as the one we have here in Holland, Michigan, that include discrimination, that allows discrimination in housing and employment, have harmful effects on people's lives. Amending the ordinance to provide equal protections is a health, well-being, and safety concern in our community. LGBTQ+ individuals are our family members, they're our community members, they're our neighbors, our children, our grandchildren, and they are Holland. They are not on the outside, but rather they are within our community and valued members of our community. This cannot wait. We must address it now. I would like to present the mayor and the city council a formal request to amend the non-discrimination ordinance as signed by 35 mental health professionals that practice in and around the city of Holland. It reads, "We, the undersigned, affirm the inherent dignity and worth of LGBTQ+ individuals and the expectation that they should have equal access to housing and employment free from discrimination based on their gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. As licensed mental health professionals working in and around the city of Holland, we attest discrimination of any kind, including housing and employment, is detrimental to the health and well-being of such individuals and our community at large. We request that the City Council of Holland, Michigan take measures to ensure and protect the rights of LGBTQ+ individuals in all areas of citizenship and social life, including housing and employment. Respectfully signed, Krista Anderson, PhD, Jennifer Bauer, PhD, Tracy Bajanio, NP, Brian Bajanio, LMSW, KJ Boyd, LMSW, Lena Chavez, PhD, Bethany Kramer, LPC, Ron Dirksey, MD, Teresa Gargala, PsyD, Kristen Gray, PsyD, Lorraine Harper, LMSW, Michael Jansen, PhD, Jennifer Cates, LMSW, Jack Klott, LMSW, Rebecca Klott, PhD, Tonya McCurchie, LPC, Ann McKnight, LMSW, Stacy McNeely, LMSW, Tom Mullins, LMSW, Jenna Nineheis, LMSW, Kim Richardson, LMSW, Patricia Rowling, PhD, Bill Russner, PhD, Jean Russner, MSA, Gerald Schumacher, MD, Michelle Sheridan, LMFT, Lynn Stubbs, LMSW, Laura Swain, LPC, Steve Thomas, PhD, Sarah Van Tongeren, LMSW, Becky Vanderveld, LMSW, June Veriken, LMSW, Brenna Verocki, LMSW, Karen Wasink, LMSW, Diane Wiersma, LMSW. Thank you. And I have copies for the council if you'd like.
Could you just leave that with the clerk?
Yes.
Thank you. And could you, are you all set, Mr. Van Tongeren? Thank you. Thank you very much. And could you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Jeffrey Sorensen. I am the director at Out on the Lakeshore at 451 Columbia Avenue. Mayor Box and members of the council, good evening, and thank you for taking the time to hear us out tonight. As I just stated, I'm the director of Out on the Lakeshore, which is an LGBTQ+ resource center right here in Holland. In my role at Out on the Lakeshore, I've quickly come to know that Holland isn't seen as the inclusive town that previous leaders have claimed it to be. We serve a very diverse population at Out on the Lakeshore, and I've had several conversations that have really made me think about this, and I'd like to reference a few of those tonight. I had one conversation with a 60-year-old woman, a lesbian, who had only told a couple people about her sexual orientation. She had only dated one woman her entire life because she was afraid of what would happen if she opened up about who she really was. She had seen coworkers discriminated against and was fearful that it could also happen to her. And therefore, at 60 years old, I had only been the third person that she came out to because she came to Out on the Lakeshore. I also had several conversations with a gay man who wanted nothing more than to move to Holland. He loved the area, and he visited Out on the Lakeshore several times to give me progress updates on all of his exciting travels throughout the city, his tourism, and he loved it. However, unfortunately, about 2 weeks ago, I received an email from him expressing that he didn't feel that he would be accepted for who he was here in Holland, so he had decided to look elsewhere for a new home. I've also talked to many parents of LGBTQ children, some of which are in this room tonight. They've expressed that their children didn't feel that they could be themselves, even in their hometown. And therefore, many of those children have moved away to find somewhere where they can be comfortable as themselves. And finally, I've also heard several stories of LGBTQ people who have felt so uncomfortable at work when coworkers found out about their orientation or their identity that they felt the need to leave, essentially forced out of their jobs. These people had nowhere to turn to, no way to file a complaint, and this is because they weren't protected for their orientation or their identity. It's stories like these that disturb me. What disturbs me even more is that I've heard all of these stories in only the 3 months that I've been the director out on the Lakeshore. So it's with these in mind that I urge the council to make a priority to protect these people, that I serve as the director of Out on the Lakeshore, but that you also all serve as members of the council. Please begin this process to add these protections for sexual orientation, for gender identity and expression, along with the addition of job discrimination, and show that Holland truly can be inclusive and diverse, where we all get to live and work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, thank you. My name is Alina Chavis. I'm a professor of social work at Hope College, 100 East 8th Street. My home address is 196 Woodwind Drive. As I said, I'm a professor of social work at Hope College, as well as a therapist locally. Mayor and council members, we know from multiple studies that same-sex couples are more likely to be denied a mortgage and pay more for one, should they be approved, than heterosexual couples. This used to be true for people of color versus whites, for single males versus females, for single people versus married persons, for the disabled versus able bodies, for non-Christians and ethnic minorities versus the Christian majority. But somewhere in our fight for civil rights, we, the people, decided to amend things and make a change. Discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, or disability is now illegal. But we, the people, have somehow continued to not only allow discrimination, but to protect those discriminating against people based on sexual or gender identity. Somewhere in our fight for civil rights, we, the people of Holland, left out an entire population of people. We left out an entire population of people to protect and allowed them to be viewed as less than human and as undeserving. According to the National Coalition for the Homeless, 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBT, and 31% of the LGBT youth identify as African American, a double minority. As an African American, and as an African American mother of 5 in Holland, I am afraid for many things for my Black children in this community. As an African American faculty member at a majority white institution, I know what it's like to be a minority. But council members and mayor, I have the privilege of having never suffered the fear and humiliation that LGBTQIA individuals have felt when they've had to face the overt discrimination that is actually legal due to their sexual or gender identity, because of how they identify, because of who they love. Why are we, the people of Holland, standing idle in support of this? I am formally asking, as a professional, as a therapist, as a member of this community, but mostly I'm asking as a human being,
that the City Council extend the non-discrimination ordinance to include both employment and housing protections and outlaw discriminations, and that these ordinances include the language gender identity and sexual orientation. I want to be a part of a community that protects all of the people of Holland. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Could you state your name, please, and your address for the record?
Yes, hi. My name is Lynn Stubbs. I'm a therapist and a resident of Holland. My residence is 162 West 12th Street, and my place of work is 222 South River. About 9 years ago, at a meeting that has been previously discussed, my son, then a very young and idealistic high schooler, spoke at this similar meeting with City Council on this same subject. He was convinced that everyone deserves a chance to earn a living and have a safe and secure place to call home. He was frustrated and disappointed at the decision made years ago. And now we have a chance to do better. The City Council of Holland has recognized their role in protecting the health, well-being, and safety of its citizens. But what do we mean when we talk about health? I hope that when we talk about health, we are talking about more than simply the absence of disease, but we're talking about complete physical, mental, and social well-being. When looking at the factors that affect health, numerous studies state that a minimum of 50% of our health is determined by housing, employment, and fair work conditions. So, if in fact City Council is charged with protecting the health, safety, and well-being of our citizens, then they have to be concerned with protection for fair employment and housing. A large 2020 study found that individuals who identify as LGBTQ report more lifetime and day-to-day experiences with discrimination than their heterosexual counterparts. Across the nation, access to stable housing is less assured for LGBTQ Americans. In 2019, studies said that 1 out of 5 LGBTQ Americans experience discrimination when applying for jobs. 22% are not paid equally or promoted at the same rate as their peers. I could go on and on with these stats, but the bottom line is that LGBTQ plus individuals continue to face discrimination in these key areas of health, safety, and well-being. So what about here in Holland? In my office over the past 18 years, I have had the privilege to listen to many young people who identify as LGBTQ, and they've wondered if they should stay in Holland after they finish their education. They wondered if they would be able to rent apartments, buy homes, get jobs, and advance in their jobs, if they would be safe from discrimination in these basic areas that were so significant to their health and well-being. All of them had good reasons to question this, given the suspicion and discrimination they had already encountered. Most of them decided to relocate and take their talents elsewhere. City Council, we are asking you to do better, to take a stand and to say that we actually do care about the health, well-being, and safety of every member of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, I'm David Myers, and I'm your neighbor a block away at 109 West 12th Street, and I'd like to start by saying thank you. 17 years ago, I approached City Council in the city of Holland, soliciting your support for an initiative to make Holland inclusive for people with hearing loss. And in this room, you installed a hearing loop that tonight is broadcasting the proceedings to my hearing aids, making them accessible. Essentially, every worship place and every public auditorium in this community embraced that hearing inclusiveness, and that became an example to the nation. So it's now in all the new New York City taxis and subway booths in many New York City theaters, and in thousands of worship places and auditoriums across the country. Holland was an example to the nation, and I thank you for leading the way, City of Holland. And 17 years later, it strikes me, I'm back with a similar request, suggesting that we again lead the way. But I've been asked to speak to just one specific question as a social psychologist, and that is, how much public support is there for equal employment and housing protection for people of differing sexual orientation and gender identity? Gallup has periodically asked Americans about that. And last May, it put this question to Americans: Do you think gays or lesbians should or should not have equal rights as non-gays or non-lesbians? 93% of Americans said yes, they should have the same protections. 5% said no. 2 years earlier, a national survey revealed not just overwhelming Democratic support, but even majority support among conservative Republicans for, quote, laws to protect LGBT individuals against discrimination in jobs, public accommodations, and housing. Now, we still have some differences, particularly with regard to gay marriage, although now 2 in 3 Americans support that. But regardless, as a society, we're approaching a consensus in supporting equal housing and employment protections. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. And we're reaching that goal. And given the additional mandate of our recent elections, it seems like now is the time to make Holland a welcoming, inclusive community, and also an example of a family-supportive community that is gay-supportive as well. And one final thought. Given the generation gap in support for equal rights for gay people, and given also the inevitability of generational succession, you can be assured of this much, that history and your grandchildren will affirm you for the change that I anticipate you will be making. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Absolutely. My name is Kristen Gray, and I live at 60 East 13th Street here in Holland. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I also work in the community. I thought I knew what I was going to talk about this evening. I was going to talk about today's college students and how confused they are by the reluctance of communities to provide civil rights to the LGBTQ plus community. And then I discovered that this is what I actually need to talk about. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a cisgender female, meaning that I experience myself to be a female, and I was born into a body that is identified as female. I'm heterosexually married. And when David and I decided to marry, I did not question whether we would be harassed or denied a marriage license. I've been able to earn a doctorate in clinical psych, and I am fully employed in work I love, which includes retirement and insurance benefits. My husband and I are homeowners, having easily been offered a mortgage when we wanted one. And just to complete the description, I am white and proudly Christian. I'm here with all my privilege to invite you to join me in standing in the gap between all that I've been given and the insecurity of those without these privileges. You see, when we have privilege, we can either feel entitled by it or we can be motivated by it. I'm asking you to use your voices, your votes, and your positions to allow for more equitable access to housing and stronger job security for those in our community who are not able to speak out and who need these protections the most. I understand that we as human beings often fear what we do not understand. We often feel a desire to deny and avoid what is different. This divisiveness is not helpful or healthy or representative of Holland. When people are allowed to discriminate, they are actually denied the opportunity to meet, know, and value people who are different from them. And by so doing, we inadvertently support and perpetuate negative stereotypes, misinformation, and the kind of isolation that can lead to the worst impulses in human beings. So I'm asking you from my position of privilege to extend the non-discrimination ordinance to include both employment and housing protections, and that these ordinances include the language, gender identity, and sexual orientation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. And could you please state your name and your address for the record?
Sure. My name is Patricia Rowling. I live at 6686 Sunset Concourse. And thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I'm a clinical psychologist and a psychology professor at Hope College. Welcome to Holland. That's our slogan. That is our aspiration, to be a community where residents and visitors feel safe, welcome, and can thrive. But do our policies reflect our aspirations? Today, we're asking the City Council to change Holland's non-discrimination ordinance to better reflect our welcoming slogan by protecting people from being discriminated against because of sexual orientation or gender. As many have already pointed out this evening, this change is critical to the mental health and well-being of those in the LGBTQ community. But I would like to also point out that it is vital to the vibrancy and health of the entire Holland community. We have a net migration of young people out of the Holland area. With our aging population, we need to worry about how we can maintain a young and vibrant presence in West Michigan. How do we keep our sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, and grandchildren in West Michigan? One thing we can do is extend our welcoming slogan toward our LGBTQ neighbors. As Dave Myers pointed out, 93% of the population in the U.S. believe we should. The vast majority of youth in the U.S. are either LGBTQ allies or members of the community. And if those in the LGBT community and their allies feel that Holland is not a place where they can thrive, they will find other areas in which they feel they'll be more welcomed and fulfilled, as Lynn Stubbs has told us. This will be a loss for all of us. Not just an economic loss, but a personal loss. Holland would lose talented and vibrant people, our sons and daughters, because they could not thrive here, because this is not a place where they felt safe to pursue their goals. So we all lose. If we want people to feel welcome and thrive in our community, it should be reflected in our local ordinances. For the mental health of Holland's LGBTQ community and allies, as well as the health and vibrancy of our entire community, I urge the Holland City Council to include sexual orientation and gender identity as protected workplace characteristics. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And could you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Anna Weirmeyer. My home address is 29 East 28th Street. I am a therapist and the clinical manager at the Arbor Circle Holland office. I have lived, worked, and raised my kids in the community for the majority of my life. I am thankful for the rich diversity that my kids experience at Holland Public Schools, and I'm also thankful to work at an organization that celebrates and seeks out diversity. Arbor Circle would not be able to provide the same level of care for our clients without the insight and expertise of our staff who are part of the LGBTQ community. And there would be many more kids without foster homes if we were not seeking out and welcoming foster parents from the LGBTQ community. Unfortunately, I know this is not the case at all places of employment. I recently had a close friend who had yet come out, who had to listen to the owner of the company she worked for talk derogatorily about the LGBTQ community as a whole, if there was news stories that came up, or regularly gay bash people that applied to the company who he believed were gay. This work environment resulted in extreme stress and depression, and eventually to her leaving and getting a job outside of Holland. This is just one person. I can imagine many more are experiencing these prejudices and stresses every day in our community. The research supports that belief. As a community that more and more touts its celebration of diversity, we have to do more than just talk. We need policies in place that protect all people that find themselves in the minority. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And could you please state your name and address for the record?
Certainly. My name is Jill Russell, and I live at 410 Maple Avenue, and I'm one of the pastors at Hope Church across the street, which is 77 West 11th Street. When this conversation happened about 9 years ago, I was only in town about a year and a half at the time, and had the opportunity to speak to council at that time about why this ordinance was so important to me, this revision of the ordinance. And at the time I spoke about my little girl who was just in a stroller at the time, and how important it was to me that she be raised in a community where whatever gender identity, whatever sexual orientation ended up being her own, that she would feel like she could be embraced any place that she goes. She's here tonight, standing in the back, waving at you, and this issue has become really important to her. It's something that she cares about. She loves the Pride Festival and cannot wait till it comes. She's going to bring some friends with her. And it's an important piece. She's been able to be raised in a home and in a church where this is a no-brainer. My son at dinner, hearing me talk about coming here, who's only 8 years old, asked me, why in the world would anyone have a problem with someone being gay? That's my son's worldview. Now, I know that there's a whole lot of people who have a lot of concern about this, particularly from the faith community. Obviously, that's not true for the congregation that I serve. I'm very grateful for the open and affirming position Hope Church has. It's the only reason I'm the pastor there, to be quite frank. I wouldn't be otherwise. However, I belong to a denomination that's very large in this community, the Reformed Church in America. Our stated policy, and it's not really a policy, it's a theology paper that's been standing since 1978, is not open and affirming in the sense of approving of gay marriage or relationships. However, in 1978, when the Reformed Church in America wrote this paper, they included a section on the importance of standing for the civil rights in civil society for people who were, they used very different language at the time that I don't even want to use, but in their description of what we now would call the LGBTQI community. So this is a very conservative theological position paper that talked about the importance of civil rights for people in terms of housing and workplace protections. There is absolutely no problem with having those things in place and maintaining a theologically conservative view about whether or not you think those kinds of relationships are appropriate according to Scripture. So I feel quite confident that the City Council can do this and not cause harm to conservative Christians in this community. Here's what I would also like to remind us of. When it came to the inclusion of people with disabilities in our nation, the mandated ADA came before a lot of the acceptance and awareness and commitments to making this world accessible to people with disabilities. It just wasn't on the radar of people. The laws themselves are what helped to create the understanding. Even in the journey at Hope Church over the last 11 years since I've been there, we've walked quite a large learning curve about this very issue. As we've formed a ministry on accessibility, as we went through our renovation project and went above and beyond what was required of us around accessibility, we started seeing so many things. Our bulletins are different now to be easier for people with visual impairment. We think about all kinds of issues of access for people around their disabilities. That comes because of a culture that was created after laws were passed. The laws get passed first, the awareness comes second. I really appreciate the work that Oodle and others have done in this community to try to bring about good conversation. When I heard just this week that my daughter was called a bad influence because of her open and affirming ideas, I am going to go speak with that child's parent to try to have an open dialogue. That's the work we have to do. I am grateful for your willingness to consider this ordinance change.
Thank you, Jill. And could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Hello, my name is Chris Surface. My mailing address is the Council for Human Rights, P.O. Box 235, Byron Center, Michigan 49315. I come to you today in my official capacity as the founder and president of the Council for Human Rights and as the first openly gay elected president of ASPA MICAP, which is the American Society for Public Administration's Michigan Capital Area Chapter. I hold MBA and MPA dual masters from Grand Valley State University. I'm a graduate of Cornerstone University, and I'm a PhD candidate in public administration at Western Michigan University's School of Public Affairs and Administration. I am a national policy expert on LGBTQ+ issues, and I have spoken at 7 regional and national public affairs conferences across the United States. I'll be presenting at my 8th conference overall and 2nd national conference at the 2020 ASPA conference in Anaheim, California, supporting our book, The Rutledge Handbook of LGBTQIA Administration and Policy. I come to you today to offer my support in my official capacities for a non-discrimination ordinance expansion, including sexual orientation and gender identity protections in housing, employment, and public accommodations. As you may be aware, the LGBTQ plus community has been under attack over 65 times, with those attacks originating from our own federal government. Our Congress has failed to pass the Equality Act. Our Supreme Court is currently considering the question of whether sex discrimination protects sexual orientation and gender identity as it relates to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In 2011, Holland considered but rejected non-discrimination protections for the LGBTQ plus community. I was here in 2011. It has been 8 long years to get to this point again. In that time, Holland's population has only increased by 268 people. People don't necessarily feel welcomed in Holland, as this has been a theme as of late. By comparison, Kalamazoo's population has increased 1,473 people, and Grand Rapids' population has increased significantly by 10,837 people, noting that Grand Rapids has had LGBTQ plus inclusive protections the longest since 1994. In fairness to Holland, diversity and inclusiveness is not the only driver of population growth, but it is a variable in economic development that should be considered. Our book, The Routledge Handbook of LGBTQIA Administration and Policy, is a guide for public administrators and those in local government that covers some of the policy issues and policy harms facing the LGBTQ plus community. You can find this book on Amazon, but it may be cost prohibitive to some people as it's $200. There is an ebook rental available for $27, and I'll be submitting a request to your local library here in Holland to carry the book so it's available to all people. Once again, I'm here today in support of an all-inclusive non-discrimination ordinance protecting the LGBTQ plus community. If you would like to communicate with me further in ways that I could help Holland with this non-discrimination ordinance, you can either snail mail me at the address that I provided, or you can contact me at chrissurface.com or chrusa.org, which is the website of the Council for Human Rights, 501c3 human rights organization. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Bobby Vanderven Kearns. My address is 17022 James Street, Holland, Michigan. And thank you for this opportunity to address this topic. The good news is that this isn't a problem that's isolated to Holland, Michigan. If any of you have seen the January issue of Vogue magazine, they've devoted it to their worldview and vision for inclusion for all people everywhere in the world. And I suggest you all read it, even if you're a man or you don't usually pick up Vogue. Now, those of you that recognize me might say, why would Bobby be here? And then others would say, well, of course Bobby would be here. I am a public school retired music teacher. I also was an adjunct at Hope College for 10 years teaching a class called Arts for the Classroom Teacher with Maxine DeBryan and Patrick Foley and Claudia Hayes Hager. And we taught all of the students that were going to be teachers how to include all 4 art forms in the 4 cores. I also was a teacher at West Ottawa for 25 years. I've been teaching public school music since 1975. Please don't add up all these numbers because then you're going to know how old I really am. I'm also the director and founder of Kids Healing Kids, and in 1996, 2 people went to Washington, D.C. for points of light citations from President Clinton. And the amazing thing is that 2 of all of them that went from Holland, Michigan were me and also the gentleman who started Kids Hope. And the Kids Hope has become don't want to say his name because I didn't get his permission to say his name. But Kids Hope has grown into 2 offshoot organizations that are worldwide now. But what I want to say is this. I also teach English as a second language to immigrants from all over the world. And
Jay sees me in the building because I teach at the Midtown Center. I also teach on site at Plascor, which is in Zeeland. I teach all of their Hispanic speakers. I've also taught at Magna Donnelly on their campus. So when you talk about immigration issues and the discrimination against those people, of course Bobby would be here to speak about that. I actually had to leave my class tonight and explain to my students why I was coming here. And one of my students who's from Iran said, but I took a real estate course and they said it was illegal to discriminate against anyone. And I said, sweetie, where are you from? And she said, Iran. And I said, have you ever experienced any discrimination in your day-to-day life? And she goes, oh yeah, in our condo unit, some people don't even want to say hello to me. So now you understand why I'm here and all my hats that I wear. But Dr. Seuss wrote a book called The Lorax. And in the Lorax book, the Lorax says, I am the Lorax, I speak for the trees. And I'm telling you, I am Bobby, and I speak for the children. I want you to imagine being a child, walking along with your parent, and witnessing overt discrimination and disrespect while you are standing there next to your parent. I want you to imagine being that child and going home while your parents or the person who is raising you, who is either an immigrant or a person of the LGTB community. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I also play a weekly gig at the Dunes down in Saugatuck, the gay nightclub. This is my 4th year there every Friday night. I used to play at Zing, the restaurant across the street, and then when they shut down, my people said, we need Bobby at the Dunes. So anyway, you'll find me there every Friday night from 5 to 7 playing cocktail music. Oh, and I've been at Christ Memorial since 1972 when I was engaged to a seminary student, and I am a heterosexual Christian woman. And I'm a Bible-believing Christian. But anyway, that aside, I am Bobby, and I speak for the children. And I do not hear this viewpoint brought up. I would like for you to consider anything that you do to be done for the children. Because I know in every world language, because I did go to Hope too, I studied world languages there. I know
Mr.
that
Mayor,
there
that is
is
5
no...
minutes.
Bobby,
1 minute?
No, I'm sorry, we can't. We
okay.
can't. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Bruce Greenlee. I live in North Holland at 16731 Ashley Lane. We still have the red light on. Are we going to red and the green? Which one do I get? Thank you. I've attended a lot of city council meetings over the past 3 years. It would be great if we had maybe half this representation and maybe a third of this amount of enthusiasm about a subject that people feel is important. And I appreciate all the fine people in this room that have expressed their views. I may have a little different than the last few folks. I have a concern not about housing and employment discrimination, but I have a concern of how this cultural issue throughout the nation, if anybody has been paying the least bit of attention, there are a lot more issues that come into play after SOGI laws are approved, including no restrictions on restrooms, no restrictions on locker rooms, competition of genetic males competing as females in high school, college, athletics. I would just encourage people to consider that those are issues that will probably be coming down the pike. The city council doesn't control what Holland City Schools does per se, totally, but those kind of issues are probably coming down the pike. So just kind of keep that in mind. Generally speaking, the gentleman that was before me that that represents a human rights council. Keep in mind also the Political Action Committee in the U.S., the Human Rights Council, as well as many gay, lesbian, and transgender and other sexual orientation groups. They have stated their goals. Probably not anybody in this room would state these goals, but the hierarchy of those organizations, initially, their mantra back in the Clinton days was equality. We want civil unions, then we want marriages, and they have stated recently, over the past few years, their objective is not equality, not tolerance. Their goal is to silence all opposition. And you can look up Human Rights Council or a variety of Gay and Lesbian Task Force, lots of other national organizations. Just keep that in mind, that those are issues, and I appreciate all the people that are sharing here. I don't have a problem with somebody not being discriminated against. I think that's only fair to all of us, whether we're gay, whether we're black, white, Asian, Christian, non-Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, or whatever. That's all important, but keep in mind that the way this train has been running over the last 10 years in the U.S., it tends to run everybody else off the tracks and tends to be easily generated into hate speech accusations. And although in the mayoral race, some things were brought up by an attorney group saying that you're basically innocent until proven guilty. This subject tends to not work that way, that I've seen reported throughout the country. Just keep in mind that, we want to have equality, but also keep in mind there are also girls in middle school that would like to be able to go to the bathroom and not have boys in their bathroom, and a variety of other issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Hi, could you state your name and your address for the record,
Good
please?
evening. My name is Ben Lim. I live in Zealand, 230 South State Street, number 139. 9 years ago, I was here with Bill Freeman, who started all this motion. We have been fighting all the way through, unfortunately not successful. But I'm here just to reiterate again that I'm still in support of the proposal. And I just would like to know also, to tell you also that about a year ago, we started a new organization, the Holland Openly Secular Alliance. Openly Secular includes also the humanist, agnostic, any other religion, and including atheists. The atheists especially suffer the same condition like all the LGBTQ members. They're afraid, petrified to come out to their friends and family circle because afraid of being ousted by them, So we are working to build a totally all-inclusive community. We will like to work with any group who trying to accomplish the same goal. Doesn't matter whether it is churches or other organization. So I just want to reiterate, we support your motion to make this reality for Holland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Certainly. My name is Eric John Shapaniak. I am a resident of Alpine Township, which is just outside of Grand Rapids. Address is 3725 St. Moritz Way Northwest. It's a Grand Rapids mailing address. I am one of the 30 elected LGBT officials across the state of Michigan and one of about 700 nationwide. I bring that up to share a little bit about what we were able to get done at Kennewick Hills Public Schools, where I serve, and the reason that we did it. So we we're able to amend our procurements clause to ensure that we're not awarding public contracts to vendors that would not hire any one of our students as soon as they graduated. And I frame it that way because the conversation that came from that discussion, which was an LGBT non-discrimination addition to that procurements clause, was to say it's impossible for us to do the work of educating students, of educating young people to be active members of their society if their society still allows them to be habitually discriminated on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. I'm in support of this ordinance, and I want to thank you all for having this discussion and having the courage it takes to start this discussion in this community. I also wanted to say that the expansion of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act statewide would also be a great addition, and is something that I would encourage you, if this resolution is passed, to also consider directly contacting your legislators about this and encouraging them to do the same statewide. And the reason behind that is because this ordinance here in Holland and the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act statewide are good for all people. My mother comes from a generation where she talks about her friends from high school as her girlfriends. I'm still really good friends with one of my mother's best friends, and she says, "Oh, my girlfriend Brenda." And my mother is a heterosexual woman, but just the perception of her being LGBTQ is enough for her to be denied health care. It's enough for her to be denied a place to live. And she is not gay. She's not gay, but just that perception is enough. So if you have someone that does not fit the norm in any sort of setting here in Holland or across many, many parts of this state, if you have anyone that is even perceived to be LGBTQ, they are also at risk of this, which is why the only way forward is to ensure that all people are able to live free from discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric John. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Hi, my name is Amber Marie Cowles. I live at 12126 Meadow Lane Court, Apartment 2B on the north side. Hi, I'm an out and proud trans girl. That means I may have been born in a man's body, but several years ago I figured out that I was a female and have been living according to that ever since. I have benefited greatly from Out on the Lakeshore services here, as when I came down here, I was an atheist alone, and that was enough to scare the living daylights out of me. But as a trans girl, I find myself petrified to work in the city of Holland. I consider myself lucky that my current employer has a bathroom that has single occupancy with a door with a lock. At my last employer, I had to go toe to toe with my employer just to use the bathroom. I have at every employer I go to in the city of Holland, because there's also the fear that I can lose my job at any given moment. I have to ask the employer, are they okay on transgender issues? Am I going to be allowed to use my name and pronouns? Because at my last employer, I had to fight to be called Amber Marie, and I had to fight to use she, her pronouns. And my previous employer would not back me up on pronouns at all. My hope is that, yes, I may live on the north side, but I do want to move to Holland proper, and I don't see myself doing so unless this ordinance is passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber Marie.
Hi.
Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Ruth Lowry, and I live at 10312 Riley Street in Holland Township, and looking to move to Holland. My family and I were all I was raised in Rockford, Illinois, and all four of us kids have moved here and raising our babies here, who are now grown-ups. When my kids were in junior high and high school, I took them here because I wanted them to see democracy in action. I wanted them to see how the voice of the minority could actually be spoken for. They know that I'm very involved in civil rights, particularly when it comes to protecting particularly African Americans. And they know that the civil rights legislation is what protects African Americans, like with the voting right bills in the 60s. So I thought they were going to see that happen in Holland. While they sat there till midnight, one of the council members said, "Is this what people vote for us to do?" So I'm inviting you to make the hard decision. It actually isn't that complicated. I was raised in an evangelical church. I can win, at least back in the day, most scripture memorization. You get candy for it. That's the way you get people to love Jesus. And yet, in my evangelical Christian school, Rockford Christian Elementary School in Rockford, Illinois, I knew intuitively that the way Anita Bryant was talking about gay kids was wrong. And when I was going through my parents' stuff as they sold their home, I found a paper that I wrote in cool bubble letters, as you would in 1978 in 8th grade, entitled Gay Rights. My children, when they saw what happened years ago, junior high and high school, now they're both in college, about to graduate, said, "Are you gotta be kidding me?" Because they couldn't believe that the voices of this body would make sure that all the citizens are cared for. Some of the things that are kind of like red herrings, where there's concerns, bathroom bill, are actually able to be addressed. It doesn't need to be that big of a deal. When we talk about religious liberty, it has to be for everybody. I am ordained in the Reformed Church in America for 30 years. I'm not protected in my denomination as a woman, and there are a lot of gay folks not in our denomination and not in this city. A couple weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. to explain the pastoral concerns to the legislators. We were able to meet with Justin Amash and Fred Upton because this is central to how a democracy must work. Everybody is supposed to be protected. Finally, when we think about it theologically, there are a lot of books. David Meyer's great book, Case for Gay Christian Marriage, if you want to get educated about the passages that are used to bam people over the head. Think about the passages for those who are Christian, who use our Christianity as a reason to oppose this kind of legislation. And so often in the Bible, people were asking, in essence, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with him? What's wrong with the person with the issue of blood, that woman? What's wrong with them in John 9? What's wrong with this man? Was he born blind because he sinned or because his parents sinned? And we use a theological premise to dismiss human beings rather than realize that everybody's welcome, and you get to have the cool opportunity to make sure that that's actually the case. I hope you show our kids the way it's supposed to work. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ruth. And could you state your name and your address for the record, please?
Allison Vanderbush, 256 West 23rd Street. I'm here to address one of the arguments against this matter that came up the last time it was brought up, and that was that it isn't an issue here in Holland, and therefore it should just be left well enough alone. One, that's not true, that it's not an issue. And two, it really comes down to the fact that no one should have to hold their breath waiting to be rejected. Let me explain. When I was getting married, every time I made a phone call and revealed I was gay, I held my breath, waiting for the person to refuse me or reject me based on the person who I loved. Every time I look at a new job description, the first thing I look at is if they include sexual orientation under the anti-discrimination section. This is to know, before I even walk into an interview, if I'm going to be safe, or again, if I have to hold my breath, hide a piece of who I am until I know, that it is safe to reveal who I am. You now have a chance to ensure that no other LGBTQ person ever has to hold their breath wondering if they're going to be rejected when it comes to housing and employment. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Penny Jansen. I live at 115 East 48th Street, Lot 6. I am a mother of a transgender child. When my child came out to me and subsequently divorced from my husband for his unaccepting of her, I had to find a place to live. I questioned if I should stay in Holland, but this is where I grew up, and I wanted to stay here by my family. My mom and dad grew up in this town, and this is home. I found a place to stay. I own a home, and my child, wherever she goes, I am almost always with her. She is afraid to go anywheres for how she will be treated. How she will be treated in a grocery store, how she will be looked at anywheres. She is a beautiful child. And I am going to stay in this town, and I am going to take the mantle, and I'm going to fight for the rights of my child. Just like my father, Roger Jansen, took up the mantle to fight for the rights of the veterans in this town, I am going to fight for the right for my child to have a job, to eventually get a home of her own, and to be able to walk into a grocery store or any store downtown and be treated with respect that she deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. And could you state your name and address for the record, please?
I'm Joanne Karn. I live at 348 Annaline Avenue, Holland, 49424. I'm here because I have a grandson who is in his late 40s who is gay, and I have a great-grandson who is 12 and is gay. And I know that as Jesus stood beside the woman who was a prostitute, about to be stoned to death by a group of men, and he said to them, "You who are without sin, cast the first stone." And they all walked away. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Hi, could you state
Hi.
your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Kat Schulte. I live at 61 West 14th. I'm really appreciative of everyone that's here tonight. I love all of the arguments and points that everyone's making. But just one thing I wanted to say before this was concluded was just that before the election that we recently had, I think we all remember that some of the candidates had a pamphlet that came out about their stance on LGBTQ protections. They were clear that they were not in support of those protections. And it became kind of a big deal in Holland. I think it was a big hullabaloo that we all heard about, and everyone seemed to have a stance on it. And shortly after that, the people voted. And we voted against that stance very clearly. We elected this group here, those of you who are running, to stand up for LGBT protections for employment and housing. We very clearly did that. You have our support. So we just ask that you take that stance and stand up for what we requested you do when we elected you. We are behind you. We've got your back, and we're very excited for the change that's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Kim Nyack, 282 Lakeshore Drive South. I was here 9 years ago with my friends and family, and especially my son, who is in the back there. And at the time, he was just 15, almost 16, and he was on the way in to see about this, to listen what was happening with the ordinance. You know, he read the mission statement and the belief statement on the wall in there, and just thought it can't go any other way but to look out for everyone, and was so shocked. And he worked to organize a march across the town with about maybe 200, 250 kids from all over Holland, one after the other, saying, we're going to leave if this doesn't change. And it's been happening. I still have 3 more kids behind him. I'm a mother of 5. I don't have a PhD or anything in counseling or anything like that, but I have 5 kids. And I'm a half Native American woman, half Dutch. My husband is an Indian from India. We have 2 children who are mixed race, African American, Caucasian, one who's Latino Caucasian, and we experience discrimination in this town. It's very real still. And so I'd like to speak to you and ask you to please consider this ordinance again. And we were told no last time. One of the biggest challenges was the community's not educated. It's been 9 years, and I guarantee everyone in this audience that's here in support has done their job in the last 9 years. So it's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Is there anyone else here who would like to address council? And could you state your name and address for the record, please, sir?
Bob Ashby, 967 Songbird Lane. With all due respect to liberal theological interpretations of the Bible, my good friend and pastor, Ralph Houston, called this morning. He is in failing health and couldn't be here tonight. But he asked me to start out with this. To make the point that if you take the Bible at its word, as it appears on the pages, both the Apostle Paul and Jesus Christ himself would be able to be accused of hate speech under current cultural conditions. My credentials are not relevant. Nobody's credentials are relevant. What's relevant is what is true or not true. Now, to summarize the points, I would like to visit this as the debate progresses and as time gives opportunity. First, in the final analysis, the push for an ordinance is really about suppressing free expression and conscience and spirit. Next, biblical love does not rest on behavior. Biblical love behavior does not rest on feelings or preferences or pragmatism or assertions or stories. Next, in order to level the debate playing field and promote honest language, there are 2 terms that I would like to introduce. As far as I know, they are not established terms, but given currently accepted standards of language definitions by LGBTQ activists, I believe they qualify. These are my terms. First one is dissentophobia. It is the preoccupation with projected possibilities of victimhood from those who have dissenting convictions. Heterophobia. Preoccupation with heterosexual rejection in the public square of the gay lifestyle. Next point. In our fallen world, certain basic principles apply. First, common traits or lifestyles do not justify imposition of values. Next, common traits or lifestyles do not generate rights. Next, there is no right against being offended or rejected. Next, perception is not reality. Inclinations, compulsions, rejections do not dictate who a person is. From a civil rights perspective, the institutionalization of rights follows certain requirements. They are based on, first, inherent, immutable traits as opposed to perceptions. Next, a broad moral consensus regarding the righteousness of a guarantee. Next, historic, economic, systemic, legal oppression. Next, widespread, well-established denials of free speech, public services, constitutional civil rights, or the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Next, the arguments put forward for such actions as the one proposed here are based on three things. First of all, an appeal to emotion. Pain hurts. The problem is that it's not government's job to alleviate pain. Next, red herrings. Quote, others are doing it, or quote, the culture is changing. The problem is that it is not the city's job to keep up with the Joneses. Last, straw men. You build an image of possible offenders and offenses, then attack the mirage. The problem is that proper governance cannot be justified on the basis of what could be, but on concrete events. It is claimed by people who oppose, LGBTQ rights are either homophobic or heterosexist, that too. And they use the same arguments as applied to slavery and segregation. Claims of phobia and sexism are purposely intended to belittle and marginalize individuals themselves and their sincerely held
Mr. Mayor, that's 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Bob. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Don Bergman, 62 Sunridge Drive on the north side, but I consider myself a Hollander when anybody asks. Thank you for taking up this issue again. I was here 9 years ago when that was once an issue. Discrimination is insidious for whatever reason. It's irrational, and it's hard to deal with. It's impossible to deal with it, especially if it's based on a religious belief. I know I was fired from a job because I loved my gay son. And that was 30 years ago, and I was hoping that things are changing, but it can still happen here in Holland. It was a Christian school, and I was trying to get the school to stop harassing gay kids so they wouldn't want to commit suicide like my son wanted to do. The truth is this. We live in a secular society, and a person's religious belief on this issue is pretty much irrelevant. Because anybody with a religious belief can come up with any reason to discriminate against anybody. In the history of this country, we did a pretty good job of using the Bible and religious beliefs to discriminate against black people and have institutionalized slavery for years. So it's a secular society. It's the job of any government or any government organization is to protect every citizen from discrimination for whatever the reason is coming from. We're all equal, and we deserve to be treated with respect for whoever we are, tall, short, gay, straight, black, white, different religions. And I thank you for taking up this issue, and I implore you to add these non-discrimination items to Holland's ordinance so that those who are currently being discriminated against on this issue, that it can't happen in the city of Holland. My son left West Michigan as soon as he could. He comes back to visit, walks around town, and the comments he gets for walking around town guarantees he won't come back. So please take up this issue and protect part of our society that can and is being discriminated against at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. And would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. Karen Prince, 19 Old Mill Drive, Unit 13. Oh, Jay, I didn't think I'd have to come up here again. Dave, my buddies. I was compelled about 9 years ago to share some thoughts when we were doing this in June of 2009. I'm compelled again when tonight I hear the Bible mentioned. And darn it, Calvary Reformed Church in Holland Heights, I think, did a pretty good job with me. Because guess what? I know Jesus loves me. I think that's simple. Plus, we aren't on earth to hurt each other. We're here to help each other, love each other. And who you love, it just does not matter. And I saw a really cool flipping of those words. Jesus loves me, this I know. Jesus knows me, this I love. Thanks for taking this on again. I know it's going to work. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Karen. Is there anyone else here to address council? If not, I will close the public comment period.
Mayor,
Yes.
we do have a note from Sandra Jousma that will be entered into record and available for review in the clerk's office and reflected in the minutes.
All right. Thank you very much. I do just want to make a couple of comments myself. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. As I said at the beginning, this is truly democracy in action. We appreciate all of your comments. We appreciate all of you coming. And I was remiss at the beginning of the public comment period for not saying, please be respectful of one another, because I knew that people of Holland would be respectful to one another, and you were. Thank you very much. For those of you who are not interested in staying for the rest of our meeting, we'll give you an opportunity to head out. But thank you for coming. We appreciate that. Yeah. Do I just say that? You need we need a motion, right? Yeah. We'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back, and we'll be back here at
have a lot of people
7 minutes. We'll
to get things accomplished.
5-minute break. 5-minute break, and we'll be back. And we are back from our 5-minute break, and I believe the next item on the agenda is item 6.1, gifts.
The city manager's office is pleased to report the receipt of the following gifts: Parks and Recreation, Lakeview Playground Project, Charles and Julie Geenan, $10,000. Parks and Recreation, Spring Fever Basketball Tournament, Gentex Team Sponsorship, $500. Downtown Group Holiday Lights Program, Big Lake Brewing LLC, $2,184. Holland Youth Advisory Council, Hayworth Inc., $750. Community Foundation of the Holland Zeeland area, $100. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
Motion to accept with appreciation
Moved
as read.
Moved by Trethewey.
Support.
Support. I'm going to give that one to Hoekstra this evening. Yeah, I gave you that. I gave you that earlier one. I think should not go without noticing. These are some pretty significant gifts for some great projects in the community. This is a fabulous community with people who show all kinds of support for great things that are going on. So thank you to these donors and to all of those who've been giving gifts all year round. With that, any other comments from council?
No.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Communications from the city manager.
It's after 8:30, so you know what that means, right? I'm going to go quick. Few items. One, just a reminder, we are entering into the holiday season, so for all of you, but also for the viewing public, December 24, 25, and January 1 are the 3 typical business days that you will not find anyone at City Hall. But please consider, think of, and thank our employees that are working that time. And we certainly extend our larger family in that. There's people with BPW, there's certainly our public safety, but also if it's snowing, we might have some of our transportation people out also. So. Then Matt Van Dyken has 2 media things for you, and I'll let him describe both the picture and then highlight a video.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of pictures. These are actually sent over by the folks at the museum. They thought it would be interesting for us to see how River Avenue looked in 1965, and this is the view from Centennial Park. This was about 8 years before I was blessed with coming onto this earth, so the view has changed a little bit since then, but it's pretty neat. You can see, especially in the first video, you can see Tower Clock in the background, and just a view of what it looked like back in '65.
And if you're interested, I will include both of these pictures in my next communication out to you, because my guess is some of you might want to take a little closer look at those.
And then, as is custom, I believe this is the last meeting of 19 heading into 20. So our video team likes to put together just a little bit of a snippet, a year in review, some of the things that we did. So without further ado.
Very well done. And that's going to be available on the city's website and social media channels for sharing, correct?
Yes, we will put it out on all of our social media. I heard a comment from Mr. Bird about the ice boating on Lake Makatawa. Interestingly enough, I actually own a DN with my dad and grew up ice boating on Gull Lake. So that was pretty exciting for me to see them out on that lake. If you ever get the opportunity, there is no acceleration like accelerating in an ice boat. You know, there are international races. I had a neighbor growing up that would race actually in the Netherlands, but quite honestly, I don't know other than just.
I have a friend, John Gronberg, who is the president of the Holland Harbor Historical Lighthouse Commission, and he is in a group that they communicate with one another. If Muskegon Lake is frozen or another lake is frozen, and they communicate with each other, and they all have ice boats, and I've been on one. And it's, you think you're going to die, but you don't. It goes
It's
so
fun,
fast.
isn't it?
You might be only going 40 miles an hour, but it's on the ice. And sometimes the edges of the ice is open water, so it adds that element. So John Gronberg would be a person, and here is that one of his friends. Is that John?
Still interested, Quincy? Yeah. All right. I'm sure they'll be able to put you together. Anything else, Keith? No, that's it. Next is communications from the mayor. Every 2 years, members of council are appointed as liaisons to different city boards and commissions. And the intent of this is to maintain a healthy flow of information between the board and the council. And so I've made some new liaison appointments. I do want to remind council members that we are awaiting the results of a study and a report from the county in terms of the structure and the makeup of our boards and commissions, and we fully anticipate that they're going to have some suggestions for us. So some of these may be changing in the near future. So don't get yourself too wedded to a particular board or commission if there may be some changes that are coming down the line. But remember that our job as liaisons to these board and commissions is to provide that communication channel back and forth, both in terms of the committee knowing what the feeling of council as a whole is in regard to what's going on in that committee, and then also as an opportunity for information from those committees to flow back to council. And we've had some discussions with council members of, when do I do that? When is the time where I might want to be saying that? Well, that's coming up in the agenda in item 15 is the communications from council members. If there's something going on in a particular committee that you're involved with, or that you have been to a meeting, because we want to encourage encourage council members to go to board meetings that may not be one that you're a liaison of. As we were commenting a week or so ago, was one of the recent planning commissions meetings. Between those sitting at the commission table and those sitting in the audience, there were 5 council members at that meeting, which I think was a great representation. So with that, I will ask for a roll call vote on the resolution for the assignment of council members. Oh, actually, we need a motion, don't we? We'll do a motion first. I'll entertain a motion.
Move we approve the list.
Moved by Ernst-Horst.
Support.
Support by Trethewey. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
We may have to make an amendment here. There is one committee that's lacking a member, and that's the audit committee. The audit committee has 2 council members on it. I know everybody is just beating the door down to get on that committee, so, but we should make a note here. Ron, amendment or just notation that one needs to be.
Is anyone interested in volunteering to be Quincy?
I'm not volunteering.
I'm sorry, I saw your hand up.
I have a question.
Sure.
What does that entail?
That entails meeting with Tim once a year to get a precursor with the auditors. We have also dealt with the whistleblower situation a couple of years ago and helped put that in. We used to meet once a quarter, but we're not going to meet if we don't have anything to do. So typically in December, the first week in December or so, we're going to get together. We're going to get a precursor, 2 board members, 2 council members, and financial staff from both departments. Get together, have the presentation. We excuse staff. We have a little discussion then with the auditors after that. That's about it in a nutshell. And if there is something that comes up in the meantime, we will call a meeting in between there. There's a potential that we're going to have one midsummer because our current chairman of that board is going to be term limited here very quickly. So we're going to have to come up with another one, and we didn't feel comfortable with only 1 member of council there.
Okay.
So no.
So it's just pretty much an annual meeting.
Yes.
Consisting of a few hours. I'm thinking, no more than 3-4 hours?
No. You have to study. You don't get a hard copy. You don't get the book. You get a hard copy of the budget. You have to memorize every page. That's about it. Hour or better.
All right. So I'm gonna volunteer, Jay.
I will do it. I had statistics.
I'll take
You'll
care
take
of
it? Okay.
Take care of it.
So a statistics teacher who said numbers are our friends.
There you
So,
go.
Yeah.
With that,
Yeah, Quincy, you'd be willing to do that?
Yep,
So what we need
absolutely.
then is an amendment to the motion.
Well, I think actually we need an amendment to the motion, I think, but the mayor is the one that designates the appointments, subject to confirmation or approval by the council, so it needs to be the mayor's appointment.
I would then appoint Quincy Byrd to the audit committee.
And then I think the motion needs to be amended.
I will second his appointment and call for an amendment to the recommendation that Quincy Byrd is added to the audit committee. The other committees stand as presented.
So we have an amendment to the motion. We need a second to the amendment to the motion.
So moved.
Yes. We're voting on one thing, just the addition of Quincy Byrd to the audit committee. And then we're going to vote on the overall thing. So I'm going to give that second to Mr. Byrd. Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Seeing none, roll call vote on the amendment to the motion.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we are back to the original motion. Any discussion from council on the original motion as amended?
Your Honor, a
Yes.
potential point of order.
Yes.
By charter, the mayor is also a member of the planning commission, which is not reflected in this appointment. I don't know if it's necessary for that to be listed in these appointments, or it's just a given by charter.
It's just a given. The mayor is automatically a member of the planning commission.
Okay.
As opposed to the council representative, where one of you has to be designated.
Okay, never mind.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments from council in regard to the amended motion? All right. Would you please call the roll?
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Trethewey,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is mayoral appointments and resignations to city boards and commissions. And could you do the summary of the request for us, Kathy? Or I can take care of it here. I'll take care of it here. I can do that. The recommendation is that the City Council approve the appointments of Andrew Blunt to the Planning Commission with a term expiring June 30, 2020, John DeCluche to the International Relations Commission with a term expiring on June 30, 2020, and accept the resignations of Lynn Raymond from the Planning Commission effective November 11, 2019, and the resignation of Andrew Blunt from the Board of Appeals effective December 17, 2019.
I will put that in the form of a motion.
All right, we have motion. Do we have support?
Support.
Support by Arnshorst. Any discussion? Seeing none, would you call the roll, please?
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Trethewey,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Number 15, communications from council members. Any communication from members of council? All right. Any motions or resolutions from council members? And then we have a first reading of ordinances. Do we have that?
No.
No? It
was covered in.
It's just on the consent. Okay. Then I have one more item on the agenda for this last meeting of 2019.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Trethewey, quickly supported by Peters. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for a great 2019, and everyone have a great and safe holiday season. Thank you very much.